Welcome to another episode of What's Working in E-commerce. I'm your host, Egan Heath from Caravan Digital. Today we have on an expert in mergers and acquisitions and selling your e-commerce business. I'm very excited to have him. Please welcome Nicholas Brown from Dragonflip. Nicholas, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on the show and have a good talk with you.
Yeah, so I think you said you're head of M&A there. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what Dragonflip does.
Yeah, I'll start with Dragonflip first. We're a e-commerce M&A firm, so we specialize in the sale and acquisition of e-commerce businesses. We were started by two Amazon business owners in 2017, and when they went to sell their businesses, there was really no one to help them sell. They were based in Germany, so because they were a big part of the German Amazon community, they had a lot of connections, and they figured other people might need these services. So they started Dragonflip, and then I came on board in 2021 to help expand to the US and UK regions. So we have a big presence in Europe, and we have a growing presence in the US and UK. Myself, Basically, I'm with the buyer the seller from the start of the process. So it starts with a valuation of the business, just to give the owner an idea of what the market will likely come in at in terms of acquisition price. And then we prepare the marketing materials to help bring the business to market, put together a sales strategy. We help vet buyers and make sure that the right buyers coming and having these buyer-seller calls with the owner of the business. And then we're there to help assess the offers, choose the best combination of price and personality fit, if you will. And then we facilitate the due diligence all the way until the money's in your account. So it's a full service offering that we can present to an owner.
That's awesome. And how do you guys respond when, say, someone's going to work with you and they say, hey, how do we make sure that our incentives are aligned, that I'm the seller, I'm selling my business, I want to make sure, I get those things I want, like you mentioned, like price and terms and things like that. How do you guys make sure you're on the same side of the table as your clients?
Well, it's a pretty, not a lengthy process, but it's pretty in-depth process before we even sign any sort of brokerage agreement. The first way we align is that we work completely on contingency. So we only get paid if we actually sell your business. There are no retainers or fees. We also align it that it's our success fee is a percentage of the sales price. So the higher the price, the higher our compensation. So that's the main thing. And then we are pretty upfront during the evaluation process. We've helped sell over 200 businesses, and we've analyzed a lot more. So we have a pretty good idea of what the market will come in at. Sometimes we're surprised, but generally speaking, we're pretty accurate in that aspect of the evaluation process. So we are pretty forthright and transparent with the business owner during that process. So we're not trying to bait and switch and give a very high asking price, and they kind of know what to expect when we have the offers coming in. And I think the last thing we do is we don't promise that you're going to get an asking price. We don't even put asking prices on our businesses. We really say we have an assessment of what we think the market will come in at, but at the end of the day, the market's going to determine what the sales price will be. So we go to the market without an asking price, and sometimes we sell for higher than what our internal valuation is. Sometimes we're a little bit lower, but we kind of let the market decide, and we have just transparency, and we're aligned at the beginning of that process. And that's how we make sure that we're on the same page with our client.
Yeah, that's well put. You and I were chatting a bit beforehand. I know you had some experience at Flippa before this organization. Tell me about that experience and kind of what did you learn, when you were at Flippa seeing all these online businesses getting sold?
Yeah, so when I was in business school getting my MBA, I had no idea. I knew I kind of wanted to work in the tech sector, but not a specific company or specific job title. So when I finished, I applied for Flippa, and it was a great experience because I got to learn about how to value various business models from content businesses, advertising, SaaS, software. Working at Flippa allowed me to get a crash course in valuation of digital businesses. It also helped me generate a nice network, so I still am in contact with people in that industry, in various industries, and it helped me kind of assess whether a buyer is serious. It was like basically just like a finishing school specifically for e-commerce M&A. So I learned a lot and got to work with businesses all over the world. And so it was a really rewarding experience. Sometimes it can be challenging in terms of assessing whether a buyer is serious or not, but it was a good experience and helped me identify that I'm really good at selling e-commerce businesses, maybe not so much at a content business, just because it's all about how you present it. So I was much better at presenting e-commerce businesses than some of the other business models, which is why I moved to Dragonflip, and we specialize in e-commerce.
Very interesting. What did you see as the differences? You mentioned it a little bit, but what was it about e-commerce that at least for you, seemed to make it easier, made more sense for selling those?
It's easier to present a tangible. For me, it was easier to present a tangible product. If it's I don't know, barber scissors or something that people can hold in their hands. You understand the inventory. I liked kind of understanding how the inventory was managed, what is a good way to manage inventory, what isn't, and really present that as a selling point in terms of transferability to a buyer. am not a coder, so it was harder for me I could present the idea of a SaaS product, but if it got into talking about the nitty gritty on like why this SaaS product is specifically better than another SaaS product, I was less capable of doing that, I guess. Then I could definitely explain why this product, this physical barber scissors, for example, were better than this other set of scissors. So it just fit my personality in the way I conceptualize and try to quote unquote sell things. So that's why e-commerce really stuck out for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Particularly that tangible nature piece of it. I could see if someone's got a content site or courses or SaaS or something, it's just a little more abstract. So that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you guys kind of do an assessment then when you first come in and you say, we look at the business, we give an estimate, or we kind of think, here's where we think it'll come in at. What sorts of things are you looking at when you're, trying to do your internal valuation on a business?
Yeah, so we look at a variety of categories, but the first thing I look at are the financials. If I'm assessing a company, I want to see at least 3 years of financials, and hopefully I'm looking at the year-over-year revenue growth would be the first thing. And we have a benchmark internally of 30% growth. If a business has 30% growth year over year in revenue, then that is really going to increase their valuation multiple. If it's under 10%, unless it's a very large business, that will likely have a neutral to negative influence on the valuation multiple. Other things we look at are the profitability. I would say any sort of profit margins over 20% really going to be attractive to a lot of buyers. If it's below 10%, again, that's not saying no one will buy the business, but you're going to limit your buyer pool when it comes to that. In terms of, in addition to financial trends, we also look at the quality of the financial statements. And that for me is very important because I've had a number of deals that have been jeopardized, especially earlier in my career, because the financials weren't prepared by a professional. And so there were lots of issues when we got the due diligence, and nothing destroys the trust between a buyer and a seller than financial discrepancies in the statements. So I am always going to look for financial statements that are prepared by a professional, and that will, to me, that increases the valuation multiple. We also look at the brand quality. So instead of having, especially when it's in the Amazon aggregator space, a brand quality is a big valuation driver. So when we're talking brand quality, we're looking at Amazon best seller rankings. If you have a large number of positive reviews, if you have a cohesive product offering. I've worked with some sellers or had discussion with some sellers who they were making a lot of money, but their brand was not cohesive. They might have one electronic product and then one product that was for like bedding that they sold a lot, but it wasn't a cohesive brand. So really, that piece of the brand quality piece is lowering your valuation multiple. You're not presenting a cohesive brand, and so the buyer doesn't really know what they're buying. They're buying a collection of products rather than an actual brand, and they're going to pay less money for that. Another thing we look at is the actual business size. Some sellers or some buyers aren't interested in any business under a million, that's making less than $1 million in revenue. So that's not going to necessarily say that no one will buy the business, but it will certainly limit the buyer pool. And the last thing we look at are growth opportunities and transferability. If you're working 40 hours a week in the business and the business is really reliant on you yourself as the owner, then you're probably going to have a lower valuation multiple than the exact same business that where the owner is working 5 hours a week, just because it's more automated. That you might have a GM that will transition with the business, and that allows for the transition of institutional knowledge as well. So a variety of things. That was kind of an overview, but we do look at a lot of qualities in order to come up with that valuation.
Yeah, thank you for talking about those. There's certainly a lot of things for people to consider as they're building their brand, building their company, if they're preparing to sell it. Tell us a little bit about, what are you seeing out there? What do the terms look like? I know everybody wants to know multiples, but there's other pieces too about how long does the previous owner stay on and things like that. What are you seeing out there right now? Right now we're speaking here in, I should say, early to mid-August 2022, and this will probably come out this fall. But, give us a sense of what's the market like.
Yeah, I mean, the market has changed quite a bit, especially since 2020. There was in combination with COVID and a lot more Amazon aggregators coming into the space, the typical multiple for an e-commerce business went from being about 2.5x of your seller's discretionary earnings, usually 2.5 to 3. And at the height of 2020 and 2021, businesses were selling for 4.5 and 5x multiples. So that was a really big boom. And that was because you have over $15 billion of capital raised by aggregators. You had a lot more competition in the market looking for quality Amazon and e-commerce businesses, and thus they were more willing to pay higher multiples. I think we started seeing this in Europe in Q4 of 2021, but I think it's expanded a little bit more throughout 2022 or throughout the whole market, is these multiples have started to come down a little bit. And that's because a number of factors. In Europe, the war in Ukraine had an impact. The rising in prices, inflation has had an impact on the market. Supply chain issues had a big impact, especially in Q4 of 2021. And and the increasing interest rates has made it harder for aggregators to get more capital. So all of these, it's really just, if you wanted to sum it up in one word, I would say it's uncertainty. And because of the uncertainty, the buyers, especially the bigger buyers, aren't buying as frequently as they were in 2021 and 2020, and they're being more cautious and more risk averse. So you might have a business in 2020 that if it was very seasonal, that might impact the valuation multiple, but you still have a lot of people interested in that business. 2022, a highly seasonal business is seen as more risky, and I would say a lot of buyers aren't even interested in doing additional due diligence just because that seasonality risk is too big for them. So the multiples have, I would say on average in 2022, have been around that 3.5x, but for the right business, there are still a lot of people out there looking to acquire. So it's not saying that you won't be able to sell your business. It's that I think that process will be a little bit longer in 2022, and it'll have a longer due diligence process because buyers are more risk averse.
Yeah, that's well put. I meant to ask also about how do buyers think about, this is an Amazon business primarily, this is a Shopify direct to consumer. How does that come into the mix as well? Kind of the seller and channel mix.
I would say largely that is buyer dependent. For example, if you have the Amazon aggregators, they want a large percentage of revenue from Amazon. And if you have that, then they'll value that much higher than Shopify revenue or revenue from eBay or Walmart. So if that's an Amazon aggregator, then it's not to say they don't care about the other marketplaces or other revenue streams, but Amazon is the most important thing. Generally speaking, for any other buyers or investment groups, they want to see that the diversification of revenue. So having Shopify and having your customer information to be able to include in the sale, all of that data is more valuable to a buyer that's not a quote unquote Amazon aggregator. So it really varies from buyer to buyer. Internally at Dragonflip, we value that diversity and having that customer information more. So if we have a diverse business, we will, in terms of revenue streams, we will certainly value that more than just a single channel player, like a 95% Amazon business, even if it's making the same amount of money.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm glad I asked about that. We work with our clients on Klaviyo email marketing, and we talk a lot here about owned growth of just having that list of previous customers, even going back to pre-e-commerce, the previous century, kind of the direct response legends like Dan Kennedy and others talk about, the most valuable thing you can have is that customer list who's bought from you before because they're going to buy again. And so it's fascinating to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, and I just to piggyback on top of that, I spoke to when you speak to an Amazon or to an e-commerce business owner, they value that customer data higher as well, and so there's a little disconnect if we're selling or trying to present this to a Amazon aggregator because they don't value the customer data very much, and so there's been it's really a disconnect, and we try to find other ways to bridge that valuation gap, and that might be having some sort of earnout or having some sort of delayed payment or bonus payment based on revenue from that the other non-Amazon revenue streams. So there are a couple of ways to bridge that valuation gap, but we have seen that it does exist when you're comparing to an Amazon aggregator and another buyer or us internally at Dragonflip, how we value.
Pretty interesting. On the earnout thing, I wanted to ask too, of what are you seeing there of when a seller sells, how long should they plan to stay on and help with the transition?
Yeah, so I would say at a minimum, the contract has between 30 and 90 days that the seller will certainly, be on to help transition and make sure things have gone, all the institutional knowledge has transitioned smoothly. We have seen, as part of the deal structure, that there can be a piece of there can be a consultant piece where the owner promises to stay on for another 6 to 12 months as a consultant, but they get paid for that time. And you can limit it. We usually limit it to, it'll be like 20 hours a week for the first 3 months, and then bring that down to 15 or 10 for the rest of the time. So that's one option. We've also seen that the most common deal structure that I've seen is 70% cash at close, another 20%, 15 to 20 as a delayed payment, maybe 6 to 12 months after the closing, and then the rest is an earnout based on either revenue or net profits. As a broker, I'm always trying to get the earnout based on revenue because there's less games you can play. But obviously the buyer usually wants it based on net profit because it takes into account all their expenses. So that piece varies, but usually the deal structure is 70% cash at close, 15 to 20 delayed payment, and the rest in an earnout.
Does the buyer have a broker as well?
Most of the time they do not. There are a couple of buy-side brokers out there. Even at Dragonflip, we do buy-side occasionally. If it's a client we've worked with, we know they have money and they have a very specific acquisition criteria. We have done some buy-side work, but I would say, it's very rare. I would say less than 10% of the deals that I have done personally have involved a buy-side broker.
Interesting. You also, when we were talking about the multiple, you talked about the, I think it was the seller's discretionary earnings. Was that the word? I'm used to hearing EBITDA. How does that relate? How is that sort of calculated of what are discretionary earnings?
So usually it varies based on the size of the business. I would say any business that's making under $1 million in revenue, you probably use seller's discretionary earnings rather than EBITDA, but they're calculated very similarly. Basically, seller's discretionary earnings would be the net profit plus one owner's salary that they paid themselves, and then you add back any other discretionary expenses. So, for example, I had a client that was running an e-commerce business, but their car payments and car insurance was part of the business's P&L. So we'd add that back because that's a discretionary expense. It's not essential to running the business. A lot of times, non-business related travel will be in there, or meals and entertainment, certain one-time fees, and if you had a large insurance, or you need to buy a large piece of equipment, or equipment is not a good example. Let's say you had a legal case that you had to pay large legal expenses, but that's not something that is likely to occur in the future. You might add that back. So really it's your net profit plus an owner's salary and then any discretionary expenses added back to get a true picture of the economic benefit that a buyer would get when acquiring this business.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm curious on both sides of what do you see as the motivation? Maybe that's obvious. It can seem like a dumb question to people, but when I'm hearing, let's say, 3.5, multiple, if just devil's advocate, like if I own the brand and I'm that hands off, like let's say I'm only working 5 to 10 hours a week on it and it's paying out, like you said, and it's growing, like you said, does the calculus start to change there where someone says, okay, I'll just keep it. I'll hire a manager. This is an asset on my books versus I want out. I want to sell. Like, I'm just sort of curious, what are you seeing in terms of, motivation of the people you work with?
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of common reasons for selling. One is they have run this business for 10 or so years and they either want to change or they're nearing retirement and they want to cash out and be done with it. That's a very common reason. Another reason I see a lot is if you start an e-commerce business, especially an Amazon brand, you likely have that entrepreneurial spirit. So they have run the business for a few years, but they might be more adept at starting a business rather than continuing the business and growing it. So you see that they've reached an inflection point where they need to hire staff or they need to expand to another marketplace globally and they don't have the expertise to do that or don't want to find the expertise. That's another reason why you want to sell. You hit that point and it's either I can cash out now or invest a lot more capital to really grow the business. So that's a common one. And then another, especially for the Amazon businesses, is they want to de-risk themselves from being reliant on Amazon. Amazon has their PPC prices have increased pretty steadily. So the cost of doing business on Amazon has continued to increase over the years. And it's notoriously difficult to get customer service on the phone. They have a lot of issues that if you browse any sort of Amazon business owner Reddit or blog, then you'll see these things. And some sellers don't want to be reliant on Amazon's algorithm to continue to grow. So that might be a reason why they're selling as well. So those are probably the most common ones. But every seller has his or her reason. But I would say those are the most frequent ones I hear.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And tell us a bit about the buyers. Who are they and what's their motivation? And maybe this is a moment to reflect on, broadly on this industry and this market. It seems like this is a new asset class or it's a new kind of subclass within, buying small businesses. What are you hearing? What's in it for the buyer? And maybe you can reflect a little bit on this market that's grown up in the last, decade plus.
Yeah, so I would say we have in our buyer pool we have a couple of categories of buyer. We have an individual buyer who maybe wants some sort of passive income, or they want something that they're not reliant on their job. Some guys or ladies have quit their jobs and decided, I want to work from home. I want to run my own business. Let me buy something that's already been established that's on the smaller side so I can hopefully grow that or just have some steady income that is not, and I can be my own boss. So those are the individual buyers. Usually they're buying a business that is valued in that $500,000 to $800,000 range. I would say the next category are investment groups. Usually it might be 2 or 3 of the individual buyers pooling their resources together. They might have individual expertise in manufacturing or order fulfillment or marketing, and they want to use their expertise to buy a business together, grow it, and eventually sell it for a higher multiple. And those are investment groups. Usually they are buying businesses between $500,000 to $1.5 million. I would say that's that range. And then you have the aggregators who vary largely in size. I mentioned earlier that collectively they've raised over $15 billion in the past since 2020 to acquire Amazon brands. And generally speaking, their strategy is to buy a lot of brands in the same category or niche and use the economies of scale and internal expertise to grow these brands on Amazon and then bring them to other marketplaces. It might be Walmart, it might be wholesale, it might even be brick and mortar businesses. But really they want to combine a lot of brands and then expand it and grow it using their internal expertise. And they're buying I saw one aggregator bought a business for an 8-figure business. I think it was around 50 million, something like that. So they can buy on the big end, and you have aggregators who specialize in smaller businesses. They buy maybe several of those, 500,000, but they have specialized in a niche like health or home and fitness or pet products. So you've seen a lot of specialization, and they're a pretty sizable piece of our buyer pool. I think right now we have 70 aggregators collectively in our buyer pool alone. But we have, and then lastly, you have your private equity. They're looking for businesses that are either 5 million or higher, and some aren't even interested in anything unless it's making in that $10 million valuation. So, and usually they have expertise in house as well, and they have the money and capital to expand to other marketplaces globally or just grow the business via advertising. So we have a variety in our buyer pool, and we kind of have an idea of when a business comes to us, who in our buyer pool would be interested, or like what kind of buyer would be interested. So that helps us kind of stratify everything and put together an effective marketing plan.
Pretty exciting. And it sounds like a lot of the changes happened just the last couple of years then, even since 2020 with those aggregators. That's been a lot of the movement in the market.
Yeah. That was certainly when the multiples started going up significantly. Before 2020, you might have had 2 or 3 aggregators in the space looking to acquire e-commerce brands, but SaaS and software businesses were selling at a much higher multiple than a e-commerce business. But in 2020, that's when everything kind of blew up in terms of the money coming in and the increasing multiples. But I think 2022, like I said earlier, that's kind of stabilize and normalize a little bit, which is to be expected. It could never be going up and constantly selling at 10x. I don't think that would have been realistic.
Sure. Well, Nicholas, we've covered some great ground today. You've talked about, what are red flags in a business that people really need to fix? What is the buyer looking for? How does this whole process work? Who are the buyers? We've covered some great stuff. Is there anything else I should have asked you about or that we should discuss?
I think the only thing that I would mention to any of your listeners or any e-commerce business owner out there that owns an e-commerce business, obviously, is that you should know what your market valuation is. Not only if you're not, because the best thing to do is to exit plan and then exit when you're ready to exit, rather than your business has been declining for a couple of months and you don't know how to fix it, so now I'm going to try to sell it. I would say if you're prepared to enter the market, you're certainly going to sell at or maximize your exit price. And the first step in that would be to get a professional valuation. We at Dragonflip offer valuations for free. You can find my calendar link, book a time, and I'm happy to talk about the process. What your valuation is currently, why we value the business that way, and things you can do to increase your valuation to maximize and reach that exit price that you want to exit at. So if I take away anything, it's get a valuation, have an idea of what your business is valued at now, and you can do this on a yearly basis. It's another way to assess growth and really assess opportunities. If someone comes to you and say, "Hey, I want to buy your business," you might have an idea of what it's worth, but if you should get a professional to do it, and we're happy to do that at Dragonflip.
That's great. Thank you. Where's the best place for people to find you?
You can find me, Dragonflip website. This is number one place, www.dragonflip.com. I'm on LinkedIn. You can always send me a request. And we're in all the major social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, but LinkedIn and our website are the best places for sure.
Right on. Nicholas, thank you for coming on and sharing what's working in e-commerce.
Thank you for having me.